The old mountain road had taken fathers from their children, travelers from their homes, and hopeful dreams from those who believed they could outrun winter. For generations, people spoke of the pass in quiet voices, warning strangers that once the snow buried the stone markers, the mountain belonged only to the wind and the wolves. Yet on the coldest morning anyone could remember, the mountain witnessed something no legend had ever foretold. A young woman struggled through the endless white, each step sinking deep into fresh snow until her boots nearly disappeared beneath the drifting ice. Her breath came in uneven clouds that vanished into the freezing air. A heavy grey cloak hung from her shoulders, soaked with melting snow, while strands of dark hair clung to her pale face. Across her back rested the impossible weight of a giant silver wolf. Its thick fur was stained crimson where blood had frozen into brittle crystals. One of its powerful forelegs hung motionless beside her arm, swaying gently with every painful step she forced herself to take. The beast was far larger than any wolf the villages had ever known, its body built with the strength of an ancient guardian rather than an ordinary hunter. It should have frightened her. Instead, she tightened her grip beneath its shoulders and climbed higher. The mountain wind screamed across the cliffs, throwing needles of ice against her face until every breath felt like swallowing broken glass. Still she refused to stop. Far below, hidden behind curtains of snow, armored riders watched from the forest. Far above, beyond clouds that touched the tallest peaks, another pair of golden eyes watched in complete silence. Neither the soldiers nor the unseen king could understand why the wolf had allowed a human to touch him. Neither could they understand why the woman refused to leave him behind. And before another sunrise reached those frozen mountains, an entire kingdom would discover that the smallest act of kindness could silence the greatest army ever assembled. Winter had shaped the people of Ash Hollow long before Mara was born. The village rested between towering mountains whose shadows stretched across the valley long before sunset. Small stone cottages huddled together against the bitter wind, their roofs buried beneath thick blankets of snow for nearly half the year. Smoke curled from narrow chimneys every morning, carrying the comforting scent of burning pine into the crisp air while children hurried between houses wrapped in patched wool cloaks their mothers had stitched through countless winters. Life there was never easy. Every family measured wealth differently. Not by gold. Not by land. But by the amount of firewood stacked beside the door and the bread left after the first snowfall. Mara owned very little. Her cottage stood at the edge of the village where the forest began, its walls worn smooth by decades of wind and rain. Moss crept between the stones, and the wooden shutters rattled every time a storm rolled down from the northern peaks. Inside, everything had its place. Bundles of dried herbs hung from the ceiling beams. Clay jars filled with roots and healing leaves lined rough wooden shelves. A single fireplace warmed the tiny room where a worn rocking chair still sat beside the flames. It had belonged to her mother. Mara never moved it. Each evening, after returning from the mountains, she would quietly brush away the dust that settled upon its armrests, almost expecting to hear the familiar rhythm of gentle rocking once again. But the chair always remained still. 10 winters had passed since sickness claimed both her parents during the harshest blizzard Ash Hollow had ever endured. She had been only 16. The snow had fallen for 9 straight days. No healer could reach the village. No messenger could cross the frozen pass. By the time the storm finally surrendered to the morning sun, silence had already entered far too many homes, including hers. Loss could have hardened her heart. Instead, it softened it. Perhaps because she knew exactly how loneliness felt. Each morning before sunrise, Mara gathered her satchel, wrapped herself in her father's old wool cloak, and climbed into the surrounding mountains searching for herbs hidden beneath snow-covered rocks and evergreen trees. Some eased fever. Others soothed aching joints or stopped bleeding long enough for hope to arrive. The elderly never needed to ask for her help. She simply came. Old Brenna, whose eyesight had nearly faded, often found fresh firewood stacked neatly outside her door before dawn. Widower Ellis never discovered who repaired the loose stones in his chimney after every storm. Children who scraped their knees while gathering water always returned home carrying tiny cloth bundles filled with sweet-smelling leaves that eased pain before bedtime. The villagers thanked her whenever they could. She only smiled. Kindness did not become smaller because no one noticed it. One grey afternoon, as pale sunlight struggled through thick clouds, Mara prepared for another journey beyond the familiar trails. Mistress Aloan, the village healer whose hands had grown too weak for long walks, carefully tied fresh bundles of dried mountain thyme together with thin strips of linen. "They'll need this before nightfall," she said softly. Mara placed the herbs inside her satchel. "The Harrow family." The old healer nodded. "The youngest boy's fever has worsened." Outside, the wind carried the promise of another storm. Several villagers glanced uneasily toward the mountains. "They can wait until tomorrow," someone muttered. Mara looked toward the distant cliffs where dark clouds slowly gathered around the highest peaks. "If they could wait," she answered gently, "they wouldn't need the medicine today." No one argued. They simply watched as she disappeared beyond the village gate. The climb became steeper with every mile. Snow creaked beneath her boots while towering pines swayed overhead, dropping soft curtains of white onto the narrow trail. Ravens circled silently above the forest before disappearing into the deepening sky. The mountains felt strangely quiet. Too quiet. Even the usual chatter of squirrels and mountain birds had faded. Only the wind remained. Hours later, after delivering the herbs to the grateful Harrow family, Mara began her journey home. The first snowflakes drifted lazily through the air. Then came dozens. Within minutes they became hundreds. The storm arrived without warning. A wall of white swallowed the mountains so completely that familiar landmarks disappeared as though the world itself had been erased. The trail vanished beneath fresh snow. The pine trees became dark shadows. The cold bit through layers of wool until her fingers grew numb around the walking staff. She searched for the old stone markers that guided travelers home. There were none. Only endless snow. She adjusted her cloak and pressed forward, hoping instinct would succeed where sight had failed. Then the wind shifted. Beneath its endless howl came another sound. Faint. Low. Painful. At first she believed it was only the groaning of frozen branches rubbing together. The sound came again. Longer this time. Not wood. Not wind. A living creature. Mara stopped. The mountains fell strangely still, as though even the storm had paused to listen. Another weak growl drifted through the snow. It came from somewhere beyond a cluster of fallen pines half buried beneath the drifting ice. She hesitated only a heartbeat before changing direction. Each careful step carried her farther from the safety of the hidden trail. The snow reached her knees. Broken branches clawed at her cloak. Finally she pushed through the last curtain of pine needles. And her breath caught in her throat. Lying beneath the shattered trunk of an ancient pine was the largest wolf she had ever seen. Its silver coat shimmered beneath layers of fresh snow like moonlight trapped beneath ice. Every slow breath lifted its massive chest before falling again with painful effort. A jagged black iron spear pierced deep through its shoulder. Blood stained the snow around it in dark crimson circles. One golden eye slowly opened. It found hers. Neither of them moved. The storm whispered around them. And for one endless moment, the mountain seemed to hold its breath. The wolf did not snarl. It did not bare its teeth or gather the strength for one final attack. It simply looked at her. Its golden eye, bright even beneath the veil of snow, held no wild fury. There was only exhaustion, pain, and something so deeply familiar that Mara felt an ache rise inside her chest before she understood why. It reminded her of the way her mother had looked during those final days of winter. Not afraid of dying. Only afraid of being left alone. The wind rushed between the pines, scattering loose snow across the clearing. Mara slowly lowered herself to one knee, careful not to make any sudden movement. Every story she had ever heard warned that mountain wolves could tear apart a grown man in moments. This one was larger than any story. Its paws were broad enough to leave prints the size of dinner plates. Thick muscles shifted beneath its silver coat each time it struggled to breathe. Even wounded, it carried the quiet power of a creature born to rule the wilderness. Still, it remained perfectly still. Mara swallowed. "I won't hurt you," she whispered, though she knew the wolf could not understand her words. Perhaps she spoke only because silence felt too heavy. The spear worried her most. Its shaft had snapped against the fallen tree, leaving only a jagged length protruding from the wolf's shoulder. Black metal glistened beneath the snow, unlike any weapon forged by the blacksmiths of Ash Hollow. She had never seen iron that dark. The wound around it had already swollen, and dried blood clung to the thick fur. If the spear remained much longer. The thought never finished. She already knew. The wolf would not survive the night. Mara slowly removed her satchel from her shoulder and placed it on the snow. Her fingers trembled, not from fear now, but from the bitter cold that had settled into her bones. She searched through bundles of herbs wrapped in linen until she found crushed winter moss, pine resin, and dried silver leaf. Simple medicines. Sometimes simple things saved lives. The wolf watched every movement. Its breathing became heavier when she leaned closer. For a moment she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Then, very slowly, the great beast lowered its head onto the snow. Not in surrender. In trust. A single tear escaped Mara before she even noticed it. She wiped it away with the back of her glove and reached toward the broken spear. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The wolf's ears twitched. She wrapped both hands around the shaft. "Please, forgive me." With one sharp pull, she tore the shattered spear free. A deep growl burst from the wolf's chest. Its entire body tensed. Blood surged from the wound, staining the white earth beneath them. Mara threw herself forward, pressing folded linen against the wound with all the strength she had. The wolf's jaws opened. Hot breath washed across her face. Its teeth rested only inches away. One movement. One instinct. And she would never return home. Instead, the enormous head slowly turned away. The growl faded. Its breathing became slow again. Mara quickly crushed the herbs together between flat stones, mixing them with melted snow and pine resin before gently pressing the green mixture against the wound. The sharp scent of mountain leaves filled the freezing air. Little by little, the bleeding slowed. Not completely, but enough. She tore long strips from the bottom of her own cloak and wrapped the shoulder as tightly as she could. By the time she finished, her fingers had become so numb she could barely tie the final knot. She leaned back with a long breath. "You'll live," she murmured. "If you keep fighting." The wolf blinked once. Its golden eye slowly closed. Whether it slept or simply lost consciousness again, she could not tell. Mara looked toward the mountains. The storm had grown worse. Snow fell sideways now, driven by winds that roared through the cliffs like angry spirits. Darkness arrived early beneath the thick clouds. Even if she found the trail, even if she reached Ash Hollow, no one would return with her. Not tonight. Not through this storm. She stared at the wolf. Then at the path home. Then back again. Reason begged her to leave. Her heart refused. She closed her eyes for only a moment. When she opened them again, the decision had already been made. You carried enough pain alone. Her voice almost disappeared beneath the wind. You won't carry it anymore. The fallen pine still rested across part of the wolf's hindquarters. Using a thick branch as a lever, Mara pushed with every ounce of strength she possessed. Nothing. The tree barely moved. She tried again. Her boots slipped beneath her. Her shoulders burned. A cry escaped her lips as every muscle strained against the frozen wood. Slowly, painfully, the trunk rolled just enough. The wolf pulled one hind leg free before collapsing again into the snow. Mara laughed softly through exhausted tears. That's one victory. It was a very small one. But tonight, small victories mattered. She searched the clearing until she found several young pine trunks broken by the storm. Using rope from her satchel and strips torn from an old blanket, she fashioned a crude sled the way her father had once taught her when hauling firewood through deep snow. It was rough, uneven, barely held together, but it might carry the wolf. After nearly an hour of pulling, lifting, and resting, she somehow managed to guide the unconscious beast onto the wooden frame. The moment she tied the final knot, the wolf suddenly opened its eyes again. Its gaze rested on her, then on the ropes, then back to her face. For one brief moment, something almost like confusion flickered within those ancient golden eyes. Mara smiled despite her exhaustion. I know. It isn't very comfortable. The corners of her mouth lifted just enough to soften the endless white around them. I've made better. The wolf remained still. Then, astonishingly, it relaxed. as though deciding the strange human deserved another chance. Mara took hold of the ropes crossing her shoulders. She leaned forward. The sled refused to move. She pulled harder. It shifted an inch. Then another. The weight behind her felt impossible. Every step demanded more strength than the last. The mountain offered no mercy. Snow climbed past her knees. Hidden rocks caught beneath her boots. More than once she stumbled, catching herself with frozen hands before she could fall face first into the ice. The wind erased her footprints almost as quickly as she made them. Hours passed. Or perhaps only minutes. Time lost meaning inside the storm. At last, when her legs refused another step, she found shelter beneath a narrow cliff where the wind could not reach them so fiercely. She gathered dry branches hidden beneath the overhanging stone and struck flint until a tiny flame finally caught. Warm light flickered against the rock. The wolf lay only a few feet away. Its breathing sounded steadier now. Mara offered it water from her flask, moistening its nose and tongue with careful hands. Again. It never tried to bite her. She sat beside the fire, wrapping her arms around her knees. The silence settled around them. Not empty. Peaceful. Outside, snow continued falling without end. Somewhere beyond the darkness, a long howl echoed across the mountains. Another answered. Then another. Mara slowly lifted her head. The howls did not sound like hunting calls. They sounded searching. The great wolf beside her raised its head for the first time since she had found it. Its ears stood alert. Its golden eyes reflected the firelight. Then it answered. The howl rolled through the mountains like distant thunder, deep, commanding, and filled with quiet strength despite the pain still gripping its body. The forest fell silent. For several heartbeats, nothing moved. Then, from somewhere beyond the curtain of snow, dozens of distant howls answered together. The answering chorus rolled across the mountains until the very stone beneath Mara seemed to hum with it. It came from every direction. From distant ridges hidden beyond the storm. From deep forests swallowed by darkness. From lonely cliffs where no traveler ever dared to climb. One voice became 10. 10 became 50. Soon the frozen wilderness echoed with hundreds of wolves calling to one another across valleys buried beneath snow. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, silence. The kind of silence that made the smallest sound seem impossibly loud. The fire crackled softly beside the cliff. A single ember drifted into the night. The great silver wolf lowered its head once more, though its ears remained raised, listening to something Mara could neither hear nor understand. She wrapped her cloak tighter around herself. "They're looking for you," she whispered. The wolf's eyes met hers. There was intelligence in that gaze. Not human intelligence. Something older. Something that belonged to mountains before kingdoms had ever risen upon them. It blinked once. Slowly. Almost as if agreeing. Morning arrived without sunlight. A pale grey sky stretched across the mountains while fresh snow covered every trace of the previous day's struggle. Mara's muscles screamed the moment she stood. Her shoulders burned beneath bruises left by the sled ropes. Her hands had blistered despite the thick gloves she wore. When she flexed her fingers, pain climbed all the way to her elbows. She looked toward the wolf. Its breathing had grown stronger. The terrible bleeding had stopped. Even so, the wound remained deep. Without proper rest, it could open again at any moment. "We still have a long way to go," she said quietly. The wolf slowly pushed itself onto its front legs. For a heartbeat, hope flickered across Mara's face. Perhaps it could walk now. The great beast tried to rise. Its injured shoulder buckled beneath its own weight. With a heavy breath, it collapsed back into the snow. Mara sighed softly. "I was afraid of that." She knelt beside it. "I suppose we'll carry each other a little farther." The wolf watched her without resistance as she adjusted the sled. Its enormous head lowered until its nose brushed lightly against her sleeve. The touch lasted only a heartbeat. Yet it carried more gratitude than words ever could. A warm smile crossed Mara's face. She scratched gently behind one of its ears before realizing what she had done. For a moment she froze. The wolf simply closed its eyes. A deep rumble vibrated through its chest. Not a warning. Contentment. Mara laughed quietly. I'll take that as permission. The mountain trail twisted higher through towering cliffs where ancient pines leaned over narrow paths carved by centuries of wind and ice. Each step became harder. The air grew thinner. Breathing felt like drinking frozen water. Still, Mara pulled. Sometimes the sled slid easily over packed snow. Other times it caught between buried stones, forcing her to lean with all her weight until it finally lurched forward. She lost count of how many times she stumbled. Each time she stood again. Around midday she noticed something strange. Small birds had begun following them. Bright winter finches landed silently upon nearby branches. Snow hares watched from beneath evergreen bushes without running away. Even a shy mountain fox appeared upon a rocky ledge, its amber eyes fixed upon the silver wolf before disappearing once more into the forest. None of the animals seemed frightened. None behaved as though a predator traveled among them. It felt as though the mountain itself had begun watching. By afternoon the storm finally loosened its grip. Clouds parted just enough for pale sunlight to spill across the endless white peaks. The snow sparkled like fields of tiny stars. As Mara crossed a frozen meadow, another wonder caught her eye. Tiny blue flowers pushed through the snow. Impossible. Nothing bloomed in the dead heart of winter. She stopped beside them. Delicate petals trembled beneath the cold breeze. Fresh. Alive. She looked back toward the sled. Several drops of the wolf's blood had fallen there earlier that morning. The flowers had appeared exactly where those crimson drops had touched the earth. Mara frowned. I've never seen anything like this. The wolf remained silent. Yet something ancient stirred behind its golden eyes. She did not understand. Not yet. Far beyond the mountains. Inside the towering black fortress of Stonewatch. Lord Cedric slammed both hands against a massive oak table. Maps scattered beneath the force of the blow. Candles flickered wildly. Around him stood armored commanders wrapped in heavy fur cloaks. None dared speak. Cedric's face bore the scars of countless battles, but none were as cold as his eyes. They lost him? He asked quietly. Silence. His voice became even softer. The Guardian escaped. One captain finally swallowed. My lord, the avalanche separated our hunters. When we reached the valley, the wolf was gone. Cedric stepped forward. His boots echoed across the stone floor. Gone. The captain lowered his head. We found blood. Cedric's expression remained perfectly still. Only blood. And? The captain hesitated. Human footprints. Cedric stopped walking. What kind of footprints? A woman, my lord. No one moved. The crackling fire became the only sound inside the great hall. Cedric slowly smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. A woman carried the Guardian. The captain nodded. We believe so. Cedric turned toward the enormous window overlooking the snow-covered kingdom beyond. So? He folded his hands behind his back. Fate has become inconvenient. Without turning around, he spoke again. Send every scout. They are not to kill her. The commanders exchanged uncertain glances. Cedric's smile widened. If she earned the Guardian's trust. His eyes darkened. She may become the key to taking the throne itself. Meanwhile, Mara knew nothing of the man hunting her. She knew only that daylight was fading again. The mountains cast long blue shadows across the snow. The temperature dropped with frightening speed. Ahead, the trail narrowed into a steep mountain pass squeezed between towering walls of black stone. The wind funneled through the gap with a long mournful whistle. This way, Mara murmured. It should lead home. She pulled the sled forward. Halfway through the pass, the wolf suddenly lifted its head. Every muscle beneath its silver coat became rigid. Its ears pointed forward. Its breathing changed. Mara stopped. What is it? The answer arrived a heartbeat later. The sharp metallic sound of armor. Then another. Snow crunched beneath heavy boots. From behind towering rocks. One soldier stepped into the narrow trail. Then another. Then another. Within moments, nearly 20 armored riders blocked the path ahead, their horses breathing white clouds into the freezing air. More soldiers climbed onto the cliffs above. Crossbows appeared along the rocks. There was no path forward. No path back. The captain removed his helmet. His gaze settled first upon Mara, then upon the giant silver wolf lying behind her. His eyes widened. "So," he said quietly, "the rumors were true." Mara instinctively stepped in front of the sled. Her hands trembled. "We don't want trouble." The captain ignored her. His attention never left the wolf. "Alive," he whispered. "The Guardian truly lives." He slowly raised one hand. Every soldier lowered a spear toward the wounded beast. Mara spread her arms wider. "No." The word escaped before she had time to think. The captain frowned. "Move aside." She shook her head. "He'll die." He already should have. Another step. "Girl." His voice turned cold. "You have no idea what you're protecting." Mara's heartbeat thundered inside her chest. Perhaps he was right. She knew nothing about this wolf. Nothing about kings. Nothing about hidden kingdoms. She knew only one truth. The creature behind her had trusted her when it had every reason not to. She would not betray that trust. "No." Her voice came stronger this time. "I won't move." For a long moment, no one breathed. The captain sighed. "So be it." He lowered his hand. "Take them." The soldiers charged. At that exact instant, the silver wolf slowly rose to its feet. For one terrifying heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. The soldiers were already running, their boots striking the frozen ground in heavy rhythm. Spears glimmered beneath the pale afternoon light. Crossbows tilted downward from the cliffs above. Horses stamped nervously, their breath rising in white clouds that drifted through the narrow pass. Mara did not move. She stood in front of the wolf with both arms spread wide, though she knew she could never shield him from so many weapons. Then she felt it. A warm breath against the back of her shoulder. The great silver wolf stepped forward. Not with the wild charge of a wounded beast. With quiet purpose. Its enormous body slipped gently between Mara and the advancing soldiers until it stood directly before her. Though its injured shoulder trembled beneath its own weight, it refused to let her face the danger alone. The wolf lowered its head slightly. Its golden eyes settled upon the captain. There was no rage in them. Only calm authority. The captain's confident stride faltered. His soldiers slowed. One young rider swallowed hard. I've never seen eyes like that." Another gripped his spear tighter. "It isn't looking at us. It feels like." He could not finish. The wolf took one deliberate step. Snow crunched beneath its massive paws. Another step. The wounded shoulder shook, but the beast never showed weakness. The mountain pass grew impossibly still. Even the horses began backing away. Animals sense things long before people did. The captain forced himself forward. "Loose your arrows." No one moved. "I gave an order." Still, not a single bowstring was released. The soldiers stared beyond the wolf. Their faces slowly drained of color. Mara noticed it too. At first she thought the cliffs had begun moving. Dark shapes appeared upon the ridges above, silent as drifting shadows. Then another. Then 10 more. Within moments, every rocky ledge overlooking the pass was occupied. Wolves. Huge wolves. Black, white, silver, gray. Each one larger than any ordinary mountain wolf. Their thick winter coats rippled gently in the wind while bright golden eyes watched every soldier below. Not one growled. Not one bared its teeth. Their silence frightened the men far more than any howl could have. A horse suddenly reared, throwing its rider into the snow. Another bolted backward. The wolves never chased them. They simply watched. The captain slowly turned in a full circle. Every escape route had disappeared. The mountain belonged to the wolves now. A cold breeze swept through the pass. It carried no scent of blood. Only pine, snow, and something ancient. Then came footsteps. Slow. Measured. Confident. They echoed from somewhere high above. Every wolf turned toward the same ridge. Without command. Without hesitation. Each lowered its head. Mara followed their gaze. A lone figure appeared at the top of the cliff. His dark cloak moved gently in the wind. Snowflakes drifted around him without seeming to touch him. He stood perfectly still against the white sky, and yet his presence filled the entire mountain. Broad shoulders. Long dark hair stirred by the cold breeze. A simple silver crown rested across his brow, shaped not with jewels but with intertwined branches that resembled wolf antlers. At his side hung no elaborate sword. Only a weathered blade worn smooth by years of use. The mountain itself seemed to recognize him. The wolves certainly did. The Alpha King had arrived. No one spoke. Not the soldiers. Not the wolves. Not even the wind. He descended the rocky path without hurry, each step sure despite the ice beneath his boots. As he reached the valley floor, the Silver Guardian lowered its massive head. The Alpha King extended one hand. His fingers rested gently against the wolf's forehead. For a long moment, neither moved. The king closed his eyes. When he opened them again, relief flickered across his face so briefly that only Mara noticed it. "You came home," he whispered. The words were soft, almost lost beneath the wind. Yet the great wolf answered with a deep rumble that echoed through the pass. Only then did the Alpha King's gaze shift. His eyes met Mara's. They were the same remarkable shade of gold as the Guardian's, though quieter somehow, carrying years of responsibility instead of untamed wilderness. He looked at her torn cloak, at the strips of cloth wrapped around the wolf's wound, at her blistered hands. Then lower. The ropes crossing her shoulders had rubbed deep red marks into her skin. Blood had dried beneath the coarse fibers. She had carried the impossible weight for miles. The Alpha King's expression remained unreadable. He slowly knelt beside the Guardian. His hand examined the carefully wrapped bandages. Mountain herbs. Pine resin. Silver leaf. Simple remedies. Applied with extraordinary care. Not the work of a royal healer. The work of someone who refused to let another living creature suffer. He rose again. "You removed the spear." It was not a question. Mara nodded carefully. "I had to." "You knew what he was?" "No." "Were you afraid?" She looked toward the wolf beside her. "I was." The king waited. "But he was hurting more than I was." Silence settled once more. One of Cedric's soldiers laughed nervously. "A touching story." The captain stepped forward, though far less confidently than before. "My lord." He inclined his head only slightly. "The woman has unknowingly interfered with matters between kingdoms." The Alpha King did not look at him. "He belongs to me." The captain pointed toward the Guardian. "We have come to reclaim what escaped." The Alpha King's voice remained calm. "You hunted him. He crossed forbidden borders. He crossed them while protecting children from your hunters." The captain's face tightened. "You have no proof." "I have his wounds." The simple answer silenced the mountain. The Alpha King finally turned. His golden eyes settled upon Cedric's soldiers. None could hold his gaze for long. "You poisoned your spears." Several men shifted uneasily. "You burned the northern forest." No reply. "You trapped wolf pups beneath collapsing cliffs." The captain's jaw clenched. "War requires sacrifice." "No." The Alpha King's voice became colder than the winter air. "Cruelty requires excuses." The words struck harder than any weapon. Even Mara felt their weight. The captain slowly reached for his sword. "We outnumber you." For the first time. The Alpha King smiled. It was not mocking. It was almost pity. "You have counted soldiers." He looked toward the surrounding ridges. "You forgot to count the mountain." The captain finally understood. Hundreds of wolves. Hidden beyond those already visible. Watching. Waiting. Every forest. Every ridge. Every shadow. The army surrounding them was far larger than anyone had imagined. The captain slowly lowered his hand from his sword. Retreat suddenly seemed wiser than pride. Before another order could be given, something extraordinary happened. The wounded guardian stepped past the Alpha King, past the soldiers, past every watching wolf. It stopped before Mara. The enormous beast slowly lowered its head until its forehead rested gently against her trembling hands. The gesture lasted only seconds. Yet every wolf across the mountains copied it. Hundreds of mighty heads bowed together, like waves rolling across a silver sea. The sound of armor shifting echoed through the pass as Cedric's soldiers stared in stunned disbelief. No one had ever witnessed such a thing. Not in stories. Not in history. Not even in the oldest songs. The Alpha King's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. He turned toward Mara once more. For the first time in many years. The ancient words spoken by the kingdom's oldest guardians no longer sounded like forgotten legend. They sounded dangerously close to truth. Far away, hidden among the retreating soldiers, one cloaked scout slipped quietly down the mountain path. He never looked back. His only thought was reaching Lord Cedric before sunset. Because if the Alpha King's wolves had bowed to a human, everything was about to change. The news reached Stonewatch before dawn. The messenger's horse collapsed the moment it entered the fortress courtyard, foam clinging to its mouth after being ridden through the night without rest. The young scout slid from the saddle, his boots barely touching the frozen ground before palace guards hurried him toward the great hall. Inside, Lord Cedric stood before a towering map carved into a wall of black stone. Red markers covered nearly every kingdom. Only one remained untouched. The Northern Realm. The Kingdom of Wolves. Without turning around, Cedric spoke. "You've seen him." "Yes, my lord." "The Guardian." "Alive." "The Alpha King." The scout swallowed. "He came himself." Cedric finally turned. "And the woman?" The young man hesitated. There were many terrible things he could report. The army of wolves. The impossible silence. The retreat. Yet none of those frightened him as much as what he had witnessed at the end. The wolves. His voice trembled. They bowed to her. The hall became still. Cedric stared at him for several long seconds. Then he laughed. Not with amusement. With disbelief. "You're exhausted." "It happened, my lord." "Hundreds of them." Cedric's smile slowly disappeared. He dismissed every guard with a single wave of his hand. Only when the great doors closed did he walk toward the enormous fireplace burning along the hall. His fingers rested upon the carved stone mantel. "There was an old prophecy," he murmured. The scout looked up. "I always believed it was a fairy tale." His reflection danced within the flames. A human heart would one day unite what fear had divided. He clenched his jaw. "I should have burned every ancient temple when I had the chance." The room fell silent once again. When Cedric finally looked back, there was no uncertainty left in his eyes. "Prepare every hunter." "My lord. I don't want the woman captured anymore." The scout felt his stomach tighten. Cedric's voice became as cold as the mountain ice. "I want the prophecy buried with her." Far to the north, the hidden kingdom welcomed Mara with a silence unlike anything she had ever known. The forest itself seemed to breathe. Towering cedar trees stood older than memory, their trunks so wide that 5 grown men could not have reached around them together. Crystal streams flowed beneath sheets of clear ice, singing softly beneath the frozen surface. Snow rested gently upon branches without breaking them, as though winter respected this place more than anywhere else. Mara followed the Alpha King through a winding stone path hidden between enormous cliffs. No gates marked the entrance. No walls rose toward the sky. Nature itself protected the kingdom. Only after passing beneath a towering arch of living roots did she finally see it. Her breath caught. Homes built from polished stone and ancient timber rested naturally among the forest, their rooftops covered in soft moss despite the snow. Bridges curved gracefully across narrow rivers where water reflected the pale winter sun. Children laughed as they chased wolf pups across open courtyards. Women carried baskets filled with fresh bread while enormous wolves walked calmly beside them. Blacksmiths hammered glowing steel without chains hanging nearby. No cages. No collars. No fear. Humans and wolves lived as one people. Mara had never imagined such a place could exist. She stopped walking. It's beautiful. The Alpha King glanced toward his home. It was. She looked at him. He continued walking. Before fear found its way here. Word spread quickly. The healer from the southern mountains. The woman who carried the guardian. People emerged quietly from workshops and homes as Mara passed. None stared with suspicion. Instead, they watched with gentle curiosity. Some bowed politely. Others simply smiled. An elderly baker stepped from her doorway and silently placed a warm loaf of honey bread into Mara's hands before disappearing again inside. A little girl, no older than 6, approached while holding the paw of a young grey wolf. Without saying a word, she offered Mara a tiny pine cone carved into the shape of a wolf. "It brings good journeys," the child whispered. Mara knelt. "Thank you." The girl smiled. "My grandmother says the forest remembers kind people." Before Mara could answer, the child hurried away, laughing as the wolf pup bounded after her. The simple kindness settled warmly inside Mara's heart. She had expected suspicion. Instead, she found welcome. The Alpha King's hall stood beneath the roots of the oldest tree in the kingdom. Its trunk disappeared so high into the clouds that its highest branches could not be seen. Inside, warm firelight reflected across polished stone walls carved with wolves, mountains, rivers, and moons. The carvings told stories older than kingdoms. Waiting, there was an old man wrapped in robes the color of winter bark. His long white hair reached almost to his waist, while countless fine wrinkles surrounded calm gray eyes that seemed to have witnessed centuries pass. He leaned upon a carved wooden staff shaped from twisted oak. The Alpha King inclined his head. "Elder Rowan." The old guardian smiled gently. "So?" His gaze rested upon Mara. "You finally arrived." Mara blinked. "You were expecting me." "I have been expecting you since before you were born." She frowned. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else." The old man chuckled softly. "No. I prayed I hadn't." That evening, after warm food and rest finally eased the ache from her journey, Elder Rowan invited Mara into a circular chamber hidden beneath the roots of the ancient tree. Hundreds of candles glowed around the room. Their light danced across faded paintings covering the stone walls. They showed humans walking beside wolves, children playing together, kings laying swords at the feet of great silver guardians. Then, the paintings changed. Smoke, fire, battles, burning forests, broken promises. Humans and wolves turned against one another. The final painting remained unfinished. Only a single figure stood beneath a rising sun. A woman. Beside her rested a wounded wolf. Mara slowly stepped closer. The resemblance sent a chill through her. "It looks like you." Elder Rowan nodded. "The artists who painted these walls died hundreds of years ago." Mara looked back. "That's impossible." "So are many things." The old guardian rested both hands upon his staff. "Our ancestors believed that strength would save this kingdom." He shook his head. "They were wrong." He pointed toward the unfinished mural. "They spoke instead of compassion. A healer. A traveler. A heart that would choose mercy before safety." Mara stared silently at the faded colors. "No." She shook her head. "I'm only an herbal healer." "I know. I don't belong in prophecies." Elder Rowan smiled warmly. "That is precisely why they speak of you." Days passed. Mara tried to ignore the prophecy. Instead, she worked. She cleaned wounds, prepared medicines, helped elderly craftsmen whose hands had stiffened from years of winter work. When hunters returned injured from patrol, she stitched torn skin beneath warm lantern light. She never asked whether they were wolves or humans. Pain looked the same in every face. One afternoon she heard quiet crying behind a stable. There she found 3 wolf pups curled tightly together. Their tiny ears drooped. Their noses rested against one another as though trying to stay warm. An older woman knelt nearby. Their mother never came home. Mara understood without asking. Border hunters. She slowly sat beside them. The smallest pup crawled awkwardly into her lap. Its heartbeat fluttered against her hands like a frightened bird. She stroked its soft silver fur until it finally fell asleep. From the shadows beyond the stable, the Alpha King watched. He had spent years earning the trust of wolves. Yet here was a woman who asked for nothing, and received it freely. Not because she commanded, because she cared. For the first time in many winters, the weight he carried alone no longer felt impossible. But peace never lingers long where envy survives. Far beyond the northern forests, black smoke rose into the pale sky. One village, then another. Cedric's armies had begun their march. And this time, they carried weapons unlike anything the Kingdom of Wolves had ever faced. The first warning reached the capital before sunrise. A lone hawk circled above the great cedar 3 times before diving toward the watchtower. Moments later, a horn echoed through the forest. Once, twice, then a third time. Its deep voice rolled beneath the ancient trees until every village, every hunter, and every family understood the meaning. The northern border had fallen. The peaceful rhythm of the kingdom disappeared almost instantly. Blacksmiths abandoned their breakfast tables and hurried toward their forges. Sparks burst into the cold morning air as glowing steel met heavy hammers. Mothers gathered frightened children inside stone homes while older boys carried baskets filled with arrows toward the city walls. Hunters tightened leather straps around their cloaks before disappearing silently into the forest with their wolf companions. The great cedar, which only yesterday had echoed with children's laughter, now carried the determined footsteps of people preparing for war. Mara stood beneath the enormous branches, watching the kingdom transform before her eyes. She had never seen fear move so quietly. No screaming, no panic, only people helping one another. The Alpha King approached from across the courtyard wearing dark armor that seemed forged from moonlit steel. A long grey cloak rested across his shoulders, and at his side hung the weathered sword that had protected the kingdom for many years. He looked every bit the ruler his people believed him to be. Yet when he stopped beside Mara, she noticed the tiredness hidden behind his golden eyes. "This is what Cedric wanted," he said softly. She looked toward the distant northern mountains. "War." He nodded. "He knows he cannot defeat the wolves while we stand together." His gaze shifted toward the families hurrying through the courtyard. "So he hopes to make us afraid." Mara remained silent for a long moment. Then she asked the question that had quietly rested in her heart since arriving. "Will you win?" The Alpha King did not answer immediately. Instead, he watched a young boy embrace an enormous black wolf before the animal disappeared into the forest with the scouts. "When war begins," he finally said, "everyone loses something." Before Mara could reply, another horn echoed across the valley. This one sounded much closer. The enemy had arrived. Cedric's army stretched across the snowy plains like a dark river flowing toward the mountains. Thousands of soldiers marched beneath crimson banners that snapped violently in the freezing wind. Siege engines rolled behind them on heavy wooden wheels, crushing the snow beneath their weight. At the front rode Lord Cedric. His black horse moved with steady confidence, untouched by the bitter cold. Behind him marched rows of hunters carrying strange weapons unlike ordinary spears. Their arrowheads shimmered with an unnatural blue light. Elder Rowan's face darkened the moment he saw them from the watchtower. "Moonstone." The Alpha King turned sharply. "Are you certain?" The old guardian nodded. "They've enchanted their weapons." Mara frowned. "What does that mean?" Rowan's hand tightened around his staff. "Ordinary steel wounds a wolf." His voice grew quieter. "Moonstone steals their strength." A heavy silence settled between them. The Alpha King understood immediately. Cedric had not come merely to conquer. He had come prepared to erase the wolves forever. The battle began before noon. The first arrows darkened the sky like a flock of black birds. They whistled through the frozen air before striking shields, walls, and ancient trees surrounding the kingdom. Then came the wolves. They burst from the forests with breathtaking speed, moving through the snow as though the mountain itself carried them forward. Their howls shook the valley. Humans fought beside them rather than behind them. Hunters protected wolves. Wolves shielded children. The lines between the two races disappeared beneath the storm of battle. Mara remained inside the healer's hall. Not because she feared the battlefield. Because wounded people needed her more. One by one they arrived. A young soldier with a broken arm. An elderly woman burned by fire arrows. A grey wolf pierced through the leg by enchanted steel. The room filled with the scent of herbs, smoke, and blood. Hands reached toward her from every corner. She never stopped moving. Bandages. Water. Medicine. Comfort. Hope. Hours slipped past without notice. Then the doors burst open. 4 warriors carried the Alpha King inside. Mara's heart stopped. His armor had been torn open across his side. Blood soaked the dark fabric beneath him. The great silver guardian walked beside the stretcher, refusing to leave even for a moment. Mara hurried forward. What happened? One soldier lowered his head. Moonstone. She carefully removed the shattered armor. The wound beneath made her breath catch. The enchanted blade had cut deep across his ribs. Dark lines spread outward from the injury like frost creeping across a frozen window. She had never seen anything like it. Elder Rowan stepped beside her. The poison is spreading. Mara looked up. There has to be something. There is. The old guardian's eyes met hers. But it grows only beyond the sacred pass. The pass Cedric controls. Silence answered her. The room suddenly felt very small. Outside, the battle continued. That night the kingdom mourned its losses beneath a sky filled with silent stars. Mara sat beside the sleeping Alpha King. The fire burned low. The great silver guardian rested at the foot of the bed, though sleep never reached its watchful eyes. She gently changed the bandages. The dark veins had spread farther. If nothing changed, he would not survive. Her fingers rested lightly against the edge of the blanket. A memory returned. The mountain. The storm. The impossible weight of an injured wolf across her shoulders. No one had asked her to save him. She had simply chosen to. The choice before her now felt no different. She quietly stood. The guardian lifted its head. Its golden eyes followed her. I'm going, she whispered. The wolf slowly rose. So are you. A faint smile touched her lips. I should have guessed. Before dawn they slipped quietly from the kingdom. Only Elder Rowan waited for them beneath the great cedar. He carried a small leather pouch. Inside rested dried herbs, fresh bandages, and a tiny crystal vial. The silver bloom grows beneath the eastern cliffs, he said. It flowers only where the first sunlight touches the mountain. Mara accepted the pouch. I'll bring it back. The old guardian placed one weathered hand upon her shoulder. No. She looked at him. You'll bring hope back. The words stayed with her as she disappeared into the forest. The sacred pass had changed. Where peaceful stone paths once welcomed travelers, towering barricades now blocked the narrow entrance. Cedric's banners hung above sharpened stakes driven into the frozen earth. Watchfires burned day and night. Crossbowmen patrolled every ridge. No army could break through unnoticed. But Mara was not leading an army. She was following a wolf. The Silver Guardian guided her through forgotten trails hidden beneath hanging cliffs and frozen waterfalls. At sunset they reached a narrow crack in the mountainside almost completely concealed by snow-covered vines. Mara touched the stone. There was a path here. The Guardian stepped inside. She followed. The tunnel stretched beneath the mountain, its walls covered with ancient carvings. Humans. Wolves. Standing together. Hands resting upon fur. Paws resting beside open palms. At the center of the tunnel stood a weathered stone arch. Words had been carved into it long ago. Though faded by centuries, one sentence remained clear. Strength built kingdoms. Compassion kept them alive. Mara stood silently before the ancient message. Perhaps this path had not been hidden by accident. Perhaps people had simply forgotten it. The tunnel opened behind Cedric's army. No guards watched the narrow exit. No one remembered it existed. Beyond the cliffs, bathed in the first light of dawn, grew a field of delicate silver flowers swaying gently despite the winter wind. The silver bloom. Each blossom shimmered as though touched by morning frost. Mara knelt carefully. As she reached toward the nearest flower, a voice echoed behind her. "I expected soldiers." She froze. Cedric stood only a few steps away. Several hunters surrounded him. His smile held no warmth. "So?" He looked from Mara to the Guardian. "The prophecy walks straight into my hands." The Guardian stepped forward, placing itself between Mara and the soldiers. Cedric sighed. Still protecting her. He slowly drew his sword. "It won't matter." The hunters raised enchanted bows. Before they could fire, a long howl shattered the morning silence. Then another. Then dozens more. The mountains answered. From hidden ridges emerged wolves. From the tunnel behind Mara came hunters of the Northern Kingdom. Behind them marched villagers carrying axes, shepherds gripping old spears, blacksmiths with heavy hammers, and farmers who refused to abandon the people who had protected them for generations. Not because a king had ordered them. Because Mara had reminded them they already belonged together. The forgotten alliance had awakened. Cedric stared in disbelief. "This." His voice cracked. "Cannot be." The Alpha King stepped from the tunnel. Pale from his wound. Still standing. The silver bloom, carried by Mara through the night, had slowed the poison just enough. He walked beside her. Not ahead. Beside. "You wanted a kingdom divided," he said calmly. Cedric tightened his grip on his sword. "I'll bury every one of you." The final battle erupted beneath the towering peaks. Snow exploded beneath pounding feet. Steel clashed against steel. Wolves leaped between frightened villagers and enemy blades. Villagers shielded wounded wolves with their own bodies. The Guardian crashed through Cedric's hunters like a silver storm, shattering enchanted spears before they could strike again. High above, ravens circled through the cold blue sky. The mountains echoed with courage instead of fear. At the center of it all, Cedric met the Alpha King. Their swords collided with a ringing sound that rolled across the valley. Cedric fought with anger. The Alpha King fought with purpose. Again and again their blades met. Neither yielded. Finally Cedric lunged in desperation. The Alpha King stepped aside. Cedric's sword struck the frozen stone beneath him. The blade shattered. Silence fell. Cedric looked down at the broken weapon in disbelief. The Alpha King placed his sword against Cedric's chest. One movement would end everything. But he lowered it. "You've taken enough lives." Guards stepped forward and seized the defeated warlord. For the first time in many years. No blood marked the end of a battle. Only justice. Spring arrived slowly. Snow retreated from the valleys. Crystal streams laughed once more beneath warm sunlight. Wildflowers painted the mountains with colors unseen through the long winter. Children from Ash Hollow crossed the northern trails without fear, carrying baskets of bread to families who had once been only legends. Wolf pups chased them through fields of blooming grass. No walls separated the kingdoms anymore. Only roads. Mara often returned to the mountain pass where she had first found the wounded Guardian. The broken spear was gone. In its place grew a circle of brilliant blue flowers. The same impossible blossoms born from drops of the Guardian's blood. One quiet evening, the Alpha King joined her there. Neither spoke for a long while. The wind no longer carried the scent of war. Only pine, wildflowers, and distant rain. The great silver Guardian lay peacefully nearby, watching the sunset paint the peaks in gold. "You changed this world," the Alpha King said at last. Mara smiled softly and shook her head. "I only carried someone who needed help." He looked across the peaceful valley where humans and wolves walked together beneath the fading light. "Sometimes," he replied, "the smallest kindness becomes the beginning of history." Above them, a single wolf lifted its head toward the evening sky. Its howl rose strong and clear, no longer carrying grief or warning, but welcome. One by one, other voices answered from every mountain. Not as a call to war. As a song of home. And beneath the first stars of a new season, the mountains that had once echoed with fear finally learned the sound of peace.